Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 78 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Now, what is one of the most unique attributes of the Super Sentai franchise, and of course to a lesser extent to the Power Rangers franchise? What makes Super Sentai in its 38 years stand out from any other television show out there, American or otherwise? Well, let me ask this question. How many years was Deep Space Nine on the air? How many years was Next Generation on the air? How many years was That 70s Show on the air? Well, the answer is 778. But the thing about those shows is that after their first season, they take all their plots and ideas and their characters, and then in season 2, they fix what was wrong, they improve upon it, and they move on. They take what was wrong and leave it behind and add new things to the characters, new backstories, new love interests, new plots, new villains, all this new stuff. And they continue on until they get to the end of the series and have a final conclusion that's a culmination of 7 years of character development and hard work. That does not sound like a Sentai series, does it? No, it does not. A Sentai series will come on, last for 50 episodes, establish the stakes and characters, wrap that up in less than a year, and then from that point, we never see those characters again. We drop it, and we move on and get introduced to a new set of characters. Right now, everybody's getting used to the ToQger cast. But you know what? Come next February, we'll forget about ToQger and we'll move on to whatever the 39th Sentai is going to go ahead and be. We're going to have a whole new set of characters, new plots, new Zords, new outfits, new everything. So the distinction that makes Sentai different is the fact that after a year's worth of work, they roll over and they do something completely different. So here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about basically Sentai sequel seasons, or series, however you want to go ahead and look at it. Basically, what they've done in the past, has it actually worked? And then, will they ever do it in the future? And how does that affect the franchise as a whole and viewership to that franchise? So let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, you know what? Before we start, let me go ahead and bring up an interesting point. As many of you all know, several weeks ago I was in Los Angeles, and during that time I met a very prominent Hollywood director, whose name I will not say on this podcast for various reasons. But we had a nice discussion with him, me and my group, and I asked him a specific question regarding how you succeed and fail as a director. And he went on to list many different ways how he feels he's successful, the way he fails as a director, and things of that nature. And one of the things he brought up is, if you are successful as a director, typically they will make a sequel of that because the movie was so good, and sometimes they'll ask you back. And I thought, okay, I'm buying that. I don't 100% agree with it, but I see where you're coming from. Well, the director I spoke with, he primarily dealt with television. So he goes on to say, well, what is television but every week another chance to do a sequel to the last episode you did? And then, of course, I thought, well, that does make sense. That, you do one episode, you move on to the next one, you continue. Because if you are like Bruce Timm, you look at each episode as something of a mini movie, basically. And the way television is moving, that's pretty much the direction it's heading. It's cinema on cable now, is basically what it is. So I want to go ahead and start with that premise. Just the idea that every episode is a sequel onto itself, basically. But where that logic falls a little bit short, at least in our discussion, is the idea that, well, usually with a television show, and again, any television show, after a season, you get to a second season, and hopefully a third and fourth, and you get to continue on stories and characters and so forth. But again, as we stated, Sentai doesn't do that, but there are notable exceptions in their history. So let me just kind of go over what Sentai has done. Now, before there was any precedent for changing every year, Go Ranger started like most television shows. It actually lasted from 1975 to 1977, had 3 seasons worth of stories. Now, from my Sentai Origins, all I have seen is the first episode of Go Ranger, and I have not actually seen the entire series. So I can't speak to what they specifically did, but I would like to believe that if you're on for 3 seasons, I would like to think that Aka Ranger changed from his first appearance to his last appearance in that series, because you have 3 years in which to develop your characters and do something with them. So I'd like to think that they took advantage of that back in the day, of course. Now, after Go Ranger and down the line, we got Denzi Man, and then that produced a semi-sequel series called Sun Vulcan, which Raptor and I have talked about on Origins as far as how it is a sequel and so forth. But basically, Denzi Man was so popular with fans that they actually considered coming back and doing a sequel season. And I'll get into more things about Denzi Man and Sun Vulcan here in a second. But they basically attempted it. It became Sun Vulcan. Sun Vulcan was nowhere near as popular as Denzi Man, but it was still popular amongst the fans, to where, in a sense, that almost kind of started the trend that after Sun Vulcan, every year you got this rotation of new shows. Now we can get into the semantics about, Bow Fever J and Jacka and how retroactively all that is kind of like tied in now. But let's just go with the premise at this point that Denzi Man and Sun Vulcan sequels to each other, and that really kind of started the trend. We'll debate the rest of that later. Now, of course, they would never do another sequel series based on that, or any type of sequel, with the exception of, well, first, Jetman. Jetman, again, wildly popular series, actually did get a sequel series in manga, which is non-canon. And from what I know about it, it's them dealing with the death of the Black Condor, and they actually recruit an American named Ken, who becomes Green Eagle. From what I can tell, they basically just repainted Black Condor's stuff green. And so I'm going to check that out eventually. But Jetman did not get a proper television sequel. It did get a manga sequel, which I'm told was also really popular amongst fans and that people enjoyed it. So there's that. And of course, the other, this actual modern day equivalent of a sequel is Akiba Ranger, which for some strange reason is getting a 3rd season. If you can go ahead and believe that. We've had 38 years of Sentai, and it is the unofficial Sentai series that is getting 3 seasons worth of continuous plots and characters and development. So, go figure. I'm not downplaying Akiba Ranger. I know Raptor is a big fan of it, but I do find it odd that the, quote, unofficial Sentai is the one that's getting multiple seasons as opposed to the official Sentai. So what we've had is 3 seasons of the original show, a semi-sequel that started the trend, and then a manga sequel within Sentai. Now, why is this? Why is it that they went into this formula? Why is it that every year we are changing things around? Well, I can't find any concrete information on that. I would like to think that instead of doing a sequel season to any particular show, they want to try something new every year. Because I guess there's something to be said that if you work on a show for a year and you want to try something new, it's really hard to fit some themes in with certain shows. Let's go, to Jetman, for example. If they had done a season after that, somebody down there was like, I want to do something with dinosaurs and mystic witches and stuff like that. Now, that's really hard to fit to your Jetman premise. You would almost need another show to do it. And they did that. It was Zyuranger. But where are we going to tell the other stories that can be told within this within the format? I would certainly like to go ahead and know. I actually found a quote somewhere a long time ago, and I don't have it with me, so I apologize if I can't remember who said it or who it's attributed to. But I do know some producer who worked on Deca Ranger basically said that if any Sentai series was to get a sequel, it would be Deca Ranger. Now, that brings up a number of questions. First of all, he says if a Sentai was ever to get a sequel. Well, again, what's preventing you from getting a sequel? You're the producer. Can't you push for a sequel to Deca Ranger? Obviously, Magi Ranger was already in the works, but why can't we have Deca Ranger Season 2? What's preventing you from doing that? And of course, the second question to that is, why a sequel of Deca Ranger? I haven't actually seen an episode of Deca Ranger, so I wouldn't be able to say yay or nay it should have a sequel, but I am told it was a pretty good series and at least had one good character that everybody kind of gravitated towards. But I do find that odd for the producer to go ahead and say, if we were to go ahead and get a sequel, why aren't you doing sequels out there? Why is it that every year we have to go ahead and change? Yes, here's the thing. There are positives and negatives to this format. The positive, as I said before, is you get to try new things every year. Every year is a different motif, a different theme. You get a chance to put some actors into the limelight, give them their first opportunity, their first break to go ahead and act, and give writers a chance to write different stories. Because again, one year you're talking about invading aliens from another dimension. The next year you talk about dinosaurs that are a construct of the gods. And then the season after that, you're doing Chinese mythology. And after that, Japanese pop culture, and so forth and so forth. You're doing all these different shows and all these different ideas. So there is something positive to that. But here's where I look at the negative drawbacks and where I think it's almost a hindrance to the Sentai franchise. First of all, change it every year. And the fact that they do introduce a lot of toys, and yes, toys are, I'm not going to admit that they're the driving force, but they are a significant portion of the profits from the show. That much I will go ahead and admit. Because of that, it seems to me that it's very gimmicky, that it's almost based on the products themselves and not the stories. As I've stated in a previous video, they're really pushing collectible devices. Go Buster did not have that, so the next year after that, we got batteries, and then this year it's collectible trains and everything. So that's kind of becoming a big deal now. So there is some sort of aspect of toy sales to it, which again kind of makes it feel gimmicky. That it's not so much, oh, we got a new show coming out this year. It's, oh, no, we got new toys coming out this year. Which, I will say, if you do a sequel, there's no reason why you can't continue to do that. I mean, look at the first two seasons of Power Rangers. First season was all based on dinosaurs, and the next season, mythological animals. Well, the story was adjusted to account for that, and they still sold their toys, and they still got a chance to go ahead and tell their stories. So it can work. But the toy aspect of it makes it feel very gimmicky. And again, it makes it feel like they're just trying to sell toys, and I don't think that that's necessarily a good idea. The second drawback is when you get attached to a character, you don't get to continue with that character after the season. And in particular, that character almost becomes stagnant. Now, there are a lot of instances of characters who change after from their first appearance to their last appearance. Dynamic characters and whatnot. But I've noticed kind of in recent years there have been a lot of static characters, Kyoryuger being the most notorious recent example. As I stated in my previous video about what I didn't like about Kyoryuger at the end is how all the characters were basically the same people we met at the beginning of the series. Ian, for example, was a playboy and messing with girls and hotshot and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, he learned some lessons down the line, but by the end of the series, what was he? Playboy, hotshot, messing with girls. He did not change at all. Now, is that because of the format, or is that really just how they want to go ahead and write his character? Well, I would believe that if we watched 7 years of Kyoryuger and saw different plots and storylines, I would guarantee you that Ian would be a completely different character by the end of the series, for better or worse, because he will have learned and we will have been with him this entire time to see his transformation. And that's the benefit of having multiple seasons. No character is going to be the same from the first time that you meet them to the last time. But when you have such a condensed storyline, you either change them to where it's, completely unbelievable that they change in this short amount of time, because they're also talking real time as well. It's a year for us, it's a year for them. Or you don't make them change, which is even more unbelievable if they just stay the same character after all the events. I mean, you put them through Armageddon and they're still the same person. That just doesn't work. So that's definitely a negative drawback of the series. And you leave things hanging that should be a continuation. Let's go back to Kyoryuger, and that's just because it's fresh in my head. We know that by the end of the series, King and Amy get together. Okay, then what? If this was any other television series in the second season, we'd be opening with them dating and having relationship problems and trying to balance work and duty and all that. But no, we're basically, in the sense of Kyoryuger, we're going from the time they get together as a couple to where their grandson, is fighting 100 years later. What? Excuse me? How do we skip over all of that? That's not a real sequel. That's just what happens later later to their descendants. Why don't we have a sequel to Kyoryuger? I mean, for all the things Kyoryuger did, there were some negative aspects of it. I will go ahead and agree, but that's why you have a second season, to fix those things, to where you don't have to rush the introduction of 50 new toys and characters and plot lines, because even that plot got a little congested towards the end. And if we are going with second season, heck, wouldn't it be great to see Yayoi try to get her revenge on Daigo and Amy? Because I love that little meme where Amy steals King away and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of funny, but I digress. The point I'm trying to get to here is the negative drawbacks of the current format is that we don't see character development, and I think that's extremely important. Because if character development was not important in Sentai, then it would just be a 30-minute long toy commercial, which it is not. Let's make that very clear. They are not having sequel seasons because they're toy commercials. That is not the reason here. But I would like to know what the reason actually is. I mean, we have living, breathing characters doing stuff, and we are concerned with what they're doing, how they're feeling, whether they will succeed or not every week. But then after a year, we stop. Why? What does the Sentai franchise have to lose by trying a sequel series? What do they have to lose by doing a second season of ToQger when it's done? I mean, that's what I'd like to go ahead and know. What are they afraid of doing? Are they afraid that they'll lose their audience because they have a second year of shows? I mean, if the show was that popular, fans would love to see a second year. And I know a lot of fans that were into Sentai when Gokaiger was out, and we've already talked about this earlier in the week. When Gokaiger came out and Go Buster came out, they didn't like it, and you lose your fans. Remember, the ratings went down after Gokaiger went to Go Buster. But imagine if Gokaiger had a second season. That promise of them going off to fight the Emperor and bring down the Empire and all that stuff. What if that was the second season? What if we get off Earth, they don't have the ability to change into other Sentai teams, and we follow them through space fighting the Zanyak with just their Gokai powers. And they get new Zord and they get new weapons and all that. Then you don't have to rely on them being on Earth and rely on the cameos and the old suits and everything. Heck, I wrote your premise for the second season right there. Why didn't we do that? Again, yes, they want to try something new with Go Buster, and I applaud them for that. But if Gokaiger was so good, why wasn't it good enough to get a second season? If Gokaiger was an American show, it would have a second season, a third season. I guarantee you Gokaiger would still be on American television right now, unless it was on the Fox network. Nevertheless, if it was that good, it should go ahead and get a sequel. It should go ahead and continue. And I don't know why it doesn't. It really baffles my mind. And when we look at Power Rangers, I don't know why Power Rangers decided to really do that. I mean, okay. So yes, they had to change the footage every year because they ran out of footage and they were trying to keep their budget and so forth. But let's be honest, for the first 6 years of the season, they kept the same continuity. It was a continuing cycle of stories. Like, this is what happened Zeo, then this is what happened Turbo, and Space picks up from where Turbo left off. We had that continuing story for better or for worse. And I think it worked. And when we got to Countdown to Destruction, it was a culmination of 6 years of storytelling that came to an end. Even when we got up to the later seasons, it's still all within the same continuity. And they did bother with what were these characters doing a year later, 2 years, 10 years, however long it was. Even if it was contrived, like a 1 year high school reunion, which nobody in the world does because that's insanely stupid, Dino Thunder. Moving on. That's the thing. In what they're semi trying to do is, I guess, with Samurai and Megaforce and all that, you get sequel seasons, but not really. It's 40 episodes spread over 2 years. And as we've well established in Super Megaforce, they are not developing characters at all. They're really regressing the characters, if anything, in those shows. But the fact remains is Power Rangers did a better attempt at growing your characters. I mean, heck, look at Billy. Billy is a prime example. Billy was on the show for 4 years. He goes from that awkward, goofy nerd in season 1, and by Zio's end, before David Yost left the show, he was cool, he was confident, he was intelligent, he was respected, he was almost a completely different character. Look at Tommy. Tommy, in the very first season, when we see him, he is kind of this shy, quiet, martial arts guy who's kind of flirting with Kimberly and all that. And, as we see later in the season, he's forgetful. He's a flawed person. He can't do everything perfectly. And then the last time we see him, before the Mega War, of course, he's a professor of paleontology, and he's calm, cool. He's become that mentor figure. He's become a teacher. He's grown up. We've seen the evolution and progression of those characters through the entire Power Rangers franchise. Why are we not getting that in Sentai? Why is it that we're settling for 50 episodes done and come back in the crossover movie, or come in 20 years later for a cameo in a single episode? Why is that a thing? Because, who wouldn't want to see a sequel to, I guess, Deca Ranger or Jetman? Or, personally, I would like to see a sequel to Geki Ranger. I would like to see a sequel to Kyoryuger so they could be better than they were before, basically. I'd love to see a sequel to Go Buster so they could redeem themselves, basically. As I've always said, stories are confined to why is this happening today. And, the Go Kaiger plot was basically the 5 space pirates come to Earth with no Sentai to defend them and fight off the Zaniac invasion. So that's that story. But again, the sequel story would be the Go Kaiger traveling through space to liberate the galaxy from the Zaniac. Okay, so you have plenty of stories to tell. I just don't know why we always have to rely on new ones every year. And I'm wondering if by the time we get to the 40th anniversary, maybe we'll get that announcement that we are going to do multiple seasons. Maybe they'll look at the Akiba Ranger format and say, hey, this worked for the unofficial Sentai, maybe this can go ahead and work for us. I don't know. But I would just like an explanation for why they don't do a sequel season. And, let's try it. What's the worst that can go ahead and happen? Yeah, they can have low ratings. Well, they've survived that. Yes, they can have low toy sales. Yeah, they can go ahead and survive that. But you know what? A second season, that's just their chance to make whatever was bad in the first season better. Because you know what? If you don't learn from the first season, then you fail in the second season, your show gets canceled. But given the show's been on for 38 years, I don't see it being canceled by experimenting with a continuation of the storyline. That's all I'm saying. So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and make it last call at the moment. I think I've said enough. I think I've said my piece. But I seriously want to know what you guys think. One, do you think that Sentai should go ahead and do a sequel season or continue on the format? And if they did this sequel season, which season would you like to see continue on? What other stories are there to tell with characters that we have? Because, again, I just want to see them do it to say, hey, it's not a gimmick. It's something that's familiar, but we are making it better. Because, heck, Sentai could be even better, if they worked on character development. Because I think that's the number one problem they have with this format is lack of true character development over an extended period of time. So, well, again, I want to thank you guys for listening. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and the tavern is now closed.